Uh-oh.
Okay, we'll start with this. Another look at the string of fighters that Most Valuable Promotions recently signed. A fighter from right here in the United States that goes by the name Natalie No Love Dove. Earlier this week, we talked about Most Valuable Promotions' signing of Naomi Valle, Dina Thorsland, Ramla Ali. Now let's talk about Natalie. Nat No Love Dove, who was in action yesterday in the Dominican Republic opposite the ring Michelle Novas, who she stopped with a body shot in the early goings of their fight in the first round. Michelle Novas, who got hit with one or two body shots at the start of the contest and decided she'd had enough, chose to stay down, allowing Natalie to bank her first recorded knockout, advancing to a professional record of 5-0 with 1 KO. 23 years old. Hailing from the great fighting city of Philadelphia, Natalie debuted as a professional in December of 2023, and now she's with MVP, campaigning in the women's super flyweight division. Super flyweight, that's where Mexico's own Irma Garcia holds the IBF, Mexico's own Ashley Gonzalez holds the WBC, America's own Jasmine Artiga has the WBA, and Japan's own Mizuki Hiruta has the WBO. That is where Natalie Dove campaigns. At 23 years old and given her generous physical dimensions for a super flyweight, it's conceivable that Natalie may one day move up to bantam, super bantam, maybe as high as feather. Some years from now, though obviously at only 5-0, 23 years old, we're a ways out from Natalie fighting for an alphabet title, challenging for one. How to best describe her? She's a bit of a slickster. Mid-range to inside fighter, moves well, picks her punches well. Mid-range to inside seems to be her sweet spot. Not an outside cutie pie like what you get from Sky Nicholson. Natalie likes to mix it up. Mid-range to inside. Good shot selection, good counter-punching, speed. So far, so good. And as stated, she was in action yesterday in the Dominican Republic as part of a Sean Boxing promotion. That was not a Most Valuable Promotions show. That was a Sean Boxing show. Sean Boxing that does a lot of shows in the Dominican Republic. And you saw what happened. The contest ended before it started. It ended before it even got to turn into a contest. The virtue of signing Natalie is obvious. She's young, she's unbeaten, with many good years to give to the sport of boxing. Her career is ahead of her, campaigning at a weight that badly needs a face. The super flyweight division is a deep division. There are a lot of good fighters there, but very few of them have a major promotional outfit behind them like Natalie now does. For a long time, the super flyweight division and the fighters in it went unnoticed because none of the major outfits had a prize stallion at that weight. This changes things. As she progresses in her boxing career, there won't be any fights that are out of reach for Natalie because this is a less political division than some other divisions. You don't have to worry about competing interests here. With a powerhouse like Most Valuable Promotions behind her, that could eventually give Natalie the run of the place. And we'll see how she makes out. All she has to do is hold up her end of the bargain. They'll get her the fights, and she has to win them. But so far, so good. She banked her first recorded knockout last night in the Dominican Republic, and the future's looking bright for Natalie No Love Dove.
But, as far as Tank Davis is concerned, I think that more and more we're talking with PBC and we'll be making fights with them.
Is part of Turkey Al Sheikh and the new is part of that prompting you guys to work together more when in the past you may not have.
That is correct.
Okay. So that's competition in the marketplace is a good thing, kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That intriguing soundbite comes to us by way of veteran boxing scribe Sean Zidale. What seems to be an alliance that is forming in response to Turkey El Sheikh's entry into the boxing space that we can expect Top Rank and the PBC to work together a lot more moving forward to not just deliver fights, but compete with Turkey. Now, why would they want to compete with Turkey? We already know about one or some PBC fighters that don't want to work with Turkey, don't want to box in Saudi. Gervonta Davis, David Benavidez. We also saw what happened last year to Top Rank's Jared Anderson, a fighter they were promoting, a fighter they're still promoting, who was approached by Turkey directly. And I suspected then that Top Rank didn't like that too much, that Turkey, in essence, poached their fighter. He goes to the guy directly, offers him the kind of money he's not making at Top Rank. And of course, Jared is going to like that, but Top Rank, not so much. If that's the case, then why did Top Rank let Teofimo Lopez go over there? Why is he about to box on one of Turkey's shows? With Teofimo, it's a little different, because they ran out of things for Teofimo to do at Top Rank, and in a very general sense, Teofimo has been a headache. Making fights for that fighter has not been easy, and getting an ROI on that investment, I don't think it bothered Top Rank that Turkey wanted to use Teofimo in particular, because that kid's a pain in the ass. But when you start thinking about what other fighters they have, like Keyshawn Davis, Abdullah Mason, Richard Torres, other fighters they're grooming, other fighters they're invested in that they're developing, they don't want to end up in a situation where Turkey is approaching them like he's already approached Jared Anderson, like he already approached Teofimo. So now they're mitigating what fighters in their stable he has access to, in essence, distancing themselves from him to do their own thing, because like I said, they've got their own plan for these fighters, their own strategy. And a part of that seems to be working a lot more with the PBC moving forward, where before they were enthralled in a Cold War for years. Now they're forming an alliance, perhaps against Turkey Al Sheikh. And that's still good. That's still good for me and you. That they wish to act as competition against Turkey and all the shows he's doing. A competitive market is a healthy market, because everybody's got to stay on their toes and shell out the best content possible, which me and you can benefit from as consumers. So if what Bob is saying is that we can expect Top Rank and the PBC to do a lot more business moving forward, where would they do that business? In what divisions? Involving what fighters? Super middleweight almost immediately comes to mind, because Top Rank co-promotes both Christian Mabili and Jaime Munguia, where the PBC promotes Caleb Plant. He's supposed to be coming back in May. Who against, I don't know. But I could see them putting something together at 168 between Caleb Plant and one of those fighters, either Christian Mabili or Jaime Munguia. You go downstairs to the middleweight division, Top Rank promotes Yanibek Alamkanalai, and the PBC promote both Erislandy Lara and Carlos Adames. Unification matches between the champions, that's long overdue. Go down even further to the junior middleweight division in a fight that we already talked about here on the channel. The upcoming Xander Zayas versus Sebastian Fundora fight that has been ordered by the WBO. Go down even further to the men's welterweight division, where Top Rank promotes Brian Norman, who's supposed to be in action later today, and the PBC promotes Mario Barrios. Go down even further. PBC's got two champions at 140 pounds. WBC champion Alberto Puello and WBA champion Gary Antoine Russell, where Top Rank has Teofimo Lopez. Now, Teofimo is spoken for at this time, but down the line, I could see Keyshawn Davis moving up from 135 up to 140. And when he gets there, he's going to need to challenge for a title. He's going to need to challenge a champion. So maybe some of those champions are PBC champions. At first glance, you can see in what divisions they might start to work together to put fights together as a response to Turkey El Sheikh to try and compete with him. It's yet another way that Turkey's having a positive effect within the boxing space. When he came into it, he wanted to bring everybody together. Now it would seem that there are some outfits that would prefer to stand apart. But if what that results in is a strengthened bond, a partnership between Top Rank and the PBC, that's not bad. That's not bad at all. Turkey is still affecting change, whether it's directly or indirectly in this instance. And we're seeing the first signs of this. The proposed Fundora versus Zayas fight, the proposed Keyshawn Davis versus Edwin De Los Santos fight. So if this continues, it could have an effect that reverberates throughout that many more weight classes in the sport to assert themselves against what shows he's doing and, in effect, compete with them. Which is what we always wanted anyway. At least I did. A more bipartisan boxing landscape that results in more fights being made possible irrespective of political boundary lines and competing interests. But of course, when you're talking about anything involving Top Rank, at this point in the juncture, we don't know what their future is. Their future on the ESPN platform. Whether or not they have one. Boxing insider Rick Glacier chimed in on it, saying, Xander Zayas is now the WBO's mandatory challenger for Sebastian Fundora. Does Top Rank take their young and inexperienced Zayas into a very risky opportunity? In prior years of Top Rank, I would have said no, but with no TV streaming deal yet in place, after their ESPN deal ends in July, don't know what decision with Zayas that Top Rank will make. It's definitely uncharted waters for Top Rank. We know that the PBC had an abysmal year last year. They only did about 5 shows. That's 5 down from 19 the year before. And in previous years, they've done as many as 36 shows in a calendar year spread across both the Showtime and Fox platforms, where last year they only did about 5, 4 of which were pay-per-views. Then you look over at Top Rank, whose ESPN deal is set to end this summer. If ESPN leaves the boxing space, where can we expect to see Top Rank's fighters moving forward? Given how many years they have in the industry, I'm confident that they'll land on their feet. But it's still a question that needs an answer. If ESPN leaves, where does Top Rank go? For this proposed alliance to work, they're gonna need a broadcaster, a major one, that makes a commitment. Not like what we've been seeing from Amazon. Amazon didn't make no commitment to the PBC. But since 2018, ESPN did make a commitment to Top Rank. If they're not set to renew, where does the money come from, and where does Top Rank go? Questions that need answers. Elsewhere in the world of boxing, we know that Canelo Alvarez is pretty much spoken for all that remains of this year. He's fighting William Skull in May, then if he wins, Terence Crawford in September. But what happens after that? What if he beats William and he beats Terence? Remember that it's a 4-fight deal with Turkey. He has a 4-fight deal. That's just 2. I remember that at the kickoff press conference for the Canelo versus Skull fight, veteran boxing scribe Umar asked Canelo, what about a Bivol rematch? Canelo Alvarez gave a positive response when asked about it, a return to light heavyweight for a Bivol rematch, saying, everything can happen. Both Dimitri and Canelo are working with Turkey moving forward, so a second fight between them is a distinct possibility. And I've seen some address that possibility by saying that Canelo Alvarez would be usurping David Benavidez's title shot, that David Benavidez is up there right now. He's the mandatory challenger. If Canelo swoops in and takes that fight from him, is that not unfair? Well, that implies that David Benavidez actually wants that fight, where I don't think he does. When you try to dictate terms to the undisputed champion who's already made more money than you have and fought on bigger stages, he beat Canelo. And he beat Zurdo. Those are 2 guys that you're eyeing, that you've been trying to fight. He's been there and done that. And he fought Artur, and he beat him too. He's undisputed. When you try to tell him what to do, you're sabotaging the fight. You're not serious about fighting him, but at the same time, you can't just walk away from that opportunity, you need an excuse.
Those are bad optics if you just leave.
You need a reason. And David's will be the politics of boxing, the platforms, the sides of the street, and all that kind of stuff. Because you're literally trying to dictate terms to Dmitry Bivol, where you're in no position to do that.
The bottom line is, if Canelo were to move up there and fight Dmitry for a second time, it's at no expense to David Benavidez because David wasn't going to fight him.
Addressing the potentiality of a Canelo versus Bivol rematch, I'm a huge fan of Canelo Alvarez, don't get me wrong. But I don't see what he can do differently in a second fight. Least of all now that Dmitry Bivol has already faced the beast from the East and beat him.
A bigger man and a bigger puncher, what was a bigger challenge for Dmitry than Canelo. He figured out Artur.
It took him 2 fights to do it, but he did it. Where he had already been there and done that with Canelo, not even having to get out of first gear. With Canelo, he won comfortably,
doing just enough.
So if I am to entertain the potentiality of Canelo Alvarez moving back up there for Dmitry to try and avenge the loss, I don't think he can. I think he's hit a ceiling. He doesn't have the punching power of an Artur Beterbiev, the output, the work rate of an Artur Beterbiev, or the size.
If Artur couldn't knock this guy out, you ain't knocking this guy out. If you ain't knocking this guy out, you're not winning a decision.
I just don't see it. Ahead of their initial meeting, I identified Dmitry Bivol as a potential banana skin, a more dangerous fight for Canelo than any of the other fights that were around at that time. That Dmitry Bivol, he ain't no slouch.
Stylistically, his style don't do your style any favors, and it doesn't help that you're undersized, that you don't actually have the physical dimensions of a light heavyweight. So the most that you can hope to do is appear the busier fighter, the more aggressive fighter. Throw combinations, punches and bunches, appear the aggressive one, and try to win the rounds that way. That didn't work for Canelo.
Winning on activity. Because he couldn't get close enough to Dmitry to land those big punches, to land those combinations, and it doesn't help that he got tired. He gassed out in the fight.
Canelo already doesn't show much of a work rate, even less when he gets tired.
He got tired in that fight. Credit to him for still finishing the fight on his feet and exhibiting good defensive prowess while being outworked, while being outlanded. But in a second fight, I don't think it goes any differently. In fact, in a second fight,
Dmitry might go a step further. He might try to stop him.
Rematches are often won by the fighter who can change, the fighter who can make adjustments. Both Canelo and Dmitry in the past have shown that same ability, but Dimitri's bigger.
Size matters. Your punches don't have the effect on Dmitry that they have on those guys at 168 or that they had on the guys at 160. At 175,
your power's not the same. You don't crack as hard. You can't cause this guy to wilt. If Artur Beterbiev couldn't take him out, Canelo can't take him out.
Sorry.
So just thinking ahead, beyond what fights Canelo is scheduled to have this year, if he faces Dmitry in the next one, I think Dmitry beats him again.
Beats him worse.
The next time, he might try to stop Canelo.